Welcome to Family Health by Mini First Aid. Mini First Aid are the UK's leading family first aid provider, and we are delighted to bring our latest podcast series to you, giving you all the information that you need around family health subjects. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the Family Health Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Unity Mutual, a trusted partner for your savings and investments and partner that understands your commitment to your child's health and financial future. When you choose Unity Mutual for a junior individual savings account, you secure your child's savings journey and receive a free mini first aid class. But it's not just about caring for their health, it's also about setting them up for a brighter future. Unity Mutual believes in enriching lives beyond pounds and pence, empowering you with both financial stability and life-enhancing opportunities. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm Kate, founder of Mini First Aid. Welcome to our podcast, Family Health by Mini First Aid. I'm absolutely thrilled that you've decided to join us for our second series of our podcast, where we continue to bring you top family health advice from leading experts. And talking of leading experts, I have a best-selling author and Pilates guru with me today. Our guest today is Claire Sparrow. Claire is a specialist in pelvic health and works with mums suffering from incontinence and prolapse. So Claire, welcome to the Family Health Podcast.
Oh, hi Kate. It's great to be here. I love what you're doing with the podcast and I hope that I can add something today.
Brilliant. Now listen, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I'm Claire Sparrow and I am a Pilates studio owner. I've run a studio for a number of years, almost 2 decades, and I'm really honoured in the UK that I have one of the highest qualifications that you can get, because I got to go and work with one of Joseph Pilates' disciples, Lolita San Miguel, out in Florida. So I've done this incredible training and had a lot of experience with her, and I now educate across the UK and internationally. And through my own experience as a mummy of 3, I discovered that pelvic health was an area that needed a little bit more nurturing and pursuing for myself and for those that I teach. So I've then done a great deal of training in that, and that's what I deliver mostly now, is working with women, mostly mums, to be honest. And not only mums, because all women do have concerns with their pelvic floors and a need to work on it. So I work with all women. And most recently, I published a book called Hope for Your Pelvic Floor, and it's a bestseller, which is amazing.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And that's been really important, because it means that all women everywhere have access to the information without necessarily having to see me.
Now, I noticed in the prologue, in the start of your book, you talk about your own personal struggles with pelvic health, and I guess that's formed an inspiration for the work that you do. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was quite difficult actually initially to even admit it, because I've always been a fitness professional and I was a dancer before that, and I believed that being strong, because I was fit, I was strong, I was relatively young when I discovered, and I felt like I had done something wrong. Mm-hmm. I felt like I'd failed as a woman. I felt like I should have known better. There was something that I could have done to prevent this from happening to me. I followed all the advice that I was given when I before and when I found out to do strengthening exercises. You know, there was an app recommended to me, certain exercises to squeeze and do it at the traffic lights, as I'm sure many of the mums listening today will have had that same advice. And what I found to my dismay is that it actually made it worse.
Right.
So I followed the advice and it made it worse. And then I realised that I needed to look at this a little bit differently. And I started researching and exploring alternative ways to restore my prolapse. And I'm thrilled to say that I managed to do that. And it's something I always am aware of in the back of my mind that it's not gone forever. It's not like, I've cured it completely, because there's a change in my anatomy, like there is for many women, especially if you've had a baby. What I've done is I've created tools and ways of working in my body that has helped it, and now I don't have any symptoms with it now.
Are there statistics about how many women are affected by pelvic health issues?
Yeah, so it's really an interesting one, because it's about 50%, give or take, of women report having some kind of pelvic health concern, whether it's prolapse, which is pelvic organ prolapse, or whether it's just general incontinence or some pain. The issue I find with that is that these are just the women that report. Okay. Many women that reach out to me actually don't know what the symptoms are anyway, so they don't necessarily know. So I think it's probably more women than even 50%. Really.
That's mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing.
That is mind-blowing.
And I always think about, if you're out with a group of friends, you're probably not talking about your pelvic floor, but 50% of you are suffering, and that suffering is happening in silence. Many, many women are literally sitting on the sidelines of their life because their decisions are being dictated by their pelvic health, and that's it's ridiculous, and it's not necessary either. We just don't know what the tools are to do something about it.
Yeah. Now, you use the word prolapse, and just so that anybody listening goes, I've heard that word before, I've heard it bandied around, I don't actually know what it means. What does prolapse mean?
So pelvic organ prolapse is, if you Google it, it's described as a dropped or fallen organ due to weak pelvic floor muscles, which is not a very nice description. When you've been diagnosed with that, and the first thing we do, we admit it, we Google it, don't we? And that's what you're going to be faced with. The reality is actually different to that. So when an organ is displaced, it's not fallen. So I like to think of it as a displaced organ. Okay. So it's a movement of an organ. But our organs are meant to move anyway. So we're automatically thinking about it as a negative thing. Our organs are meant to move. If you've got a full bladder, it's expanding and moving, and it's moving its neighbouring organs in response. So it makes sense that it moves. With a prolapse, the organ is moved somewhere we don't really want to. So it's usually displaced into the vaginal wall. This can then create a feeling of dragging, bulging, pulling, heaviness, sometimes pain, depends on how much it's moved. It's not as simple as the muscles being weak that's caused that. It's actually because the tension in our body, which is really, really important, we need to have tension, the tension is out of balance. So the tension in our body suspends the organs rather than the muscles of your pelvic floor pushing them all up from underneath. And when you think about it, it's just totally ridiculous, isn't it? That it's not possible for everything to constantly be held up from underneath. We'd be exhausted.
Sure, yeah.
It would be difficult to even just move around in everyday life, which is why if you think about things being pulled up from above, it makes so much more sense. And I think we can wrap our head around doing something about it, and it being much more possible to heal those imbalances in there.
Okay, so understanding a bit more about prolapse, that basically sounds like Google's got it slightly wrong as well. So we've got a slight correction there. So this is why the Family Health Podcast is so important, because this is about people going and Googling stuff and getting perhaps the wrong information or information that makes them feel very negatively about what's happening. Let's talk about the symptoms of prolapse then, Claire. So if somebody is experiencing prolapse, what sort of symptoms might they be experiencing?
So there's lots of different symptoms they might experience, and some of them are the things that I mentioned before, that you might feel heaviness, bulging, dragging. It can feel like a tampon is stuck half in, half out. It can be that you don't have any of those sorts of symptoms, but you have sciatic pain. I can hear everybody at home going, really? Wow, yes. Sciatic pain can be a symptom of pelvic organ prolapse. You might have pain during intimacy, so you might feel resistant towards that intimate part of your life. You might have groin pain or deep hip pain. You might have difficulty going to the loo. So it might be that rather than finding yourself incontinent, that it's the opposite, that it's difficult to go. Or you might find that it's difficult passing stools, or you can't, it's almost like a feeling that you can't fully empty, that you feel like, have I finished? Is there more there? Or you have loose stools. You might also find with urine that it's not a smooth flow, that it might be a bit staccato. And if you think about it, it's going through a different pathway that's not smooth. Yeah. So it creates that kind of, staccato kind of flow. So loads and loads of things. Can you imagine?
There's a massive list, isn't there?
Yeah.
And so is it just childbirth that causes prolapse?
Great question. Because I think it's really, really important to emphasize, yes, we're talking about family health, but all women have the potential to suffer from pelvic organ prolapse or any other type of pelvic floor symptom. Other things that can happen is if you have a hysterectomy, if you have any kind of other sort of abdominal surgery, if you have hip replacement, if you have a fall or a break. So a woman, for example, that might have osteoporosis is more prone to fracture, especially around the pelvis and the hip, and that can disrupt the balance, which is what we talked about. It is really important, and if you disrupt the balance, then you're at risk of pelvic organ prolapse.
Now there is this thing, and me being a mum as well, I can feel this myself, is the fact that talking about perhaps incontinence, prolapse, is not really the done thing. So you said, right, you go out with a group of mum friends and you might find that statistic, 50% or more of people sat around that table. Why are people not talking about it?
Oh, it's so huge. I mean, part of it is an inherited bias where it is a topic it's not the done thing to talk about your pelvic health. It's also it comes right back to where anatomy came from. So anatomy is this, we look at anatomy books, it's a picture on paper. We are three-dimensional. So when you are thinking about things three-dimensionally, it's very different to on paper. I think that it comes also back to education. When we have sex education at school, nobody's taking us to one side and explaining the function of your pelvic floor.
No.
And it would be an ideal opportunity to have that conversation. I think it goes in line with menopause and the lack of conversation about menopause. It's an inherited, and I feel excited because I feel, one of my clients said to me that it's more than what I am teaching, it's the fact that I am the voice of hope. It's why the book is called Hope for Your Pelvic Floor. And I feel we're at a turning point where women like me and like you, Kate, are able to start talking, where we have had enough of that, just accept it and put it in the background. You've had, you've had multiple children. I was told, because I had 3 children, well, what do you expect? You've had 3 children. So there's just so much information and bias coming at us from all different directions that really has made us think that this is just the way it is. And I think now we're in a generation, Kate, where I think we're going, but is it?
Yeah, now that's really interesting, because you said about this fact that because you've had children, and is there still this messaging, and I think maybe still that comes from some medical professionals as well, that this is just something that goes with having a baby. So you have a baby and you can give up trampolining for life. right? Is that not just a thing? And that you go to a trampoline park and all the women are stood along the side because nobody dares, but we laugh about it and go, ha, you won't catch me on a trampoline.
That's part of
but
the
because
problem.
we've accepted it.
Yep. And that's part of the problem, that we are reinforcing it because we do that. We laugh at it. And that's why I said, so many women are standing literally on the sidelines. I'm in there. I'm in jumping about that trampoline park because I want to be in my children's life in that way, and that determination is part of what drove me to fix my own prolapse, and it's what continues to drive me to help other women, because why shouldn't you get on the trampoline? Why should we just accept that? There are opportunities for us to learn more about how we work so that we can heal ourselves.
I was chatting to someone the other day who said, and I nodded with her, because she said, when I know I'm going to sneeze, I stop and I squeeze and then I can sneeze. And there's probably people nodding along listening to this going, yeah, that is so me.
Yeah.
Because I can't sneeze without having that control or seeming control in the first place.
It's seeming control.
Yeah. So you think that's what's going to fix it. And but at the same point, you just accept that that's what you have to do because you've had a baby.
And also because you've not been taught anything else.
Right.
We've not ever been taught an alternative. We are taught that, even the Google will tell you whatever you put in Google is your pelvic floor symptom. It will tell you it's because your pelvic floor is weak. Like there can be no other possible option for your pelvic floor other than it being weak, which we would never apply to anywhere else in our body. Our pelvic floor needs to be dynamic and flexible. It is by design made so that it can unfurl and open out at least 3 times its resting length, so that we can squat, so that we can walk, so we can birth babies. It is designed to be dynamic. It is not designed to just clench and hold. If we use maybe the idea of a lot of women will get to the front door, and as soon as they put the key in the door, they're like, oh, I'm dancing, I'm really needing to go, I'm bursting, all of a sudden out of nowhere, okay? And what they do is, like your friend, they squeeze and hold and they're pulling in. What we do when we squeeze and pull in and hold is we make the space smaller. We are compressing our bladder with our abdominal muscles and our pelvic floor, which immediately when you think about it go, oh, actually maybe that isn't the most helpful thing to do, because you're then making it harder. Whereas in fact, if you just relaxed, which is so counterintuitive, but if you relax and make more space, then you're doing the right thing for your pelvic floor. And I would say, I'm giving that as an example, but you need to train your pelvic floor to be able to do that. If you just did it all of a sudden, you're likely to weep.
So if someone says to you, right, I'm doing my pelvic floor exercises because my midwife or my GP has told me to do them, or I've got some on Google, or I've read some on a parenting website, I'm doing it while I'm sat in traffic.
All the time.
Have they missed the whole point of this then?
Yes, and I think it's really, really important to say that we all of us are applying the information that we have readily available to us. And so the recommendations that are being given to women are based on information that they have available. Mm-hmm. There is so much more information out there beyond what is available on, with your GP or other healthcare provider. And more we're understanding that our body, as I was explaining before, is a suspension system, a tensional network. So it isn't that idea of building blocks being stacked up. We grew outwards and we live that way. They are definitely missing the opportunity to truly take charge of their pelvic health and their whole body, in fact, because we're talking about pelvic floor health, but actually it's body wide, and that's what's so important, that your pelvic floor doesn't work in isolation. It literally does not work in isolation. So the idea of trying to isolate it and blame it, you are weak, this is it, it's ludicrous.
So it's a whole body approach. So your whole body approach. So people are going, right, there's hope for me then, right? I've got to have a different approach rather than just these squeezes. So what are we doing? What are we doing to have that whole body approach?
So the whole body approach is really taking it back to the kind of basics, like where do we begin, is with breath. That is the cornerstone, the foundation that everything is built on. One of the things that I've found time and time again, and I hands up, I was guilty of it. In fact, I remember, and I wrote the story in the book, I remember the moment that a girl a year above me at high school said, pull your tummy in, and then you'll have a flat tummy. So that was it. Right, great, I'll do that. I'll have a flat tummy if I pull my belly button in and pull it in. What I didn't know at that point is that when I was pulling my tummy in, I was then creating dysfunctional breathing, because by pulling in, cutting yourself in half in the middle, stops your diaphragm, your breathing, that big diaphragm, that breathing muscle, from moving fully. It stops it from communicating with your pelvic floor. So they are both working together, or should be ideally working together in this gorgeous symbiotic relationship. So when your breathing diaphragm stretches and descends, it contracts down, your pelvic diaphragm, because it's not actually a floor, but that's a bigger conversation, they go down together. And then when you breathe out, they rise up together. So inhale, they go down together. Exhale, they rise up together. But if you've cut the communication off by pulling your belly in the middle, then your pelvic floor is not going to be working properly, and your diaphragm's not going to be working properly. It then affects your internal organs and everything massively. So the first thing is to relax and retrain your breathing. And one of the things that kind of is the next step from that with breath is that if a woman's had a baby and they've had a birth injury, so 90% of women have a birth injury. That's 90%.
Wow.
So you're out with your friends, 50% have got symptoms that they know are symptoms. 90% of them have had a birth injury. Those that have had children, of course. They've had a birth injury, and a birth injury could be a graze, a tear, or an episiotomy. Okay. So those women have had an injury, quite a major injury, to their pelvic floor, and then most often no treatment or kind of rehab.
Go home and look after your baby, I think, is the treatment.
It is, exactly. Yeah. So that then creates scar tissue. Scar tissue is immobile tissue. Immobile tissue doesn't feel and lacks communication from brain to the muscles. So it's like it's dormant, it's just not able to move and respond. So you've got that on top of you've pulled your belly button in, and then your diaphragm and your pelvic floor, they're just not communicating to each other. It's so fundamental, and if we can relax that scar tissue, get some motion in there, you can get the movement back. And for most women that I work with, just doing that alone restores the function, because our body is designed to heal itself. If we just give it a wee helping hand along the way, it's amazing.
So what are the different options then for recovering? What's the different things that if they were saying, right, okay, I'm going to move away from just doing these crunches that I'd previously been told to do. What are the options? What's there for me? What am I doing? What's my hope?
Yeah, there is. I think it's important to highlight that there really is hope, and educating yourself is the first step. What I've found is that we need to believe what's possible for us, because if you don't believe that there's hope, then we're not able to receive that into our body. So believing that actually something can be done.
Yeah.
And I'm evidence of it. Many women are evidence of it. So starting with breath. Obviously, I've got the book, which is really, it's born out of the kind of desperation to be able to speak to more women everywhere, because I'm inundated with DMs on social media, emails. I've seen you here, can you explain to me what I need to do? You help my friend, and do you think there's hope for me? And I think there's hope for all women given the tools. So in the book, it leads you through each step of the way. So I bust all of the myths, because there's many myths, and we've already covered some of those today. And giving with that some case studies, so sharing women's stories at all different stages of life, so that you know, oh yes, it does apply to me, I can do something. And then it teaches you through the whole body pelvic health concepts, which is starting with your breath, then releasing the tension, then introducing movement, and the final bit, the last piece, is the strength bit. And strength, I think it's important to define what that means, because we look on the internet and we say, oh, I'm weak, so I must strengthen. It's actually, strength is control of movement, rather than just static squeeze and clench. That's not functionally how our body works. We need control of movement. We want control of the bladder. We want control of everything, even down to intimate life, because that's important too, even after you've had children. And I've had women who've said, well, we've just had to give up on sex because it's too painful, and that's just the way it is. And it doesn't have to be, because once you've learned how to breathe, once you've released the tension from scar tissue or any postural tension that you might have, then you can build up the strength and the stamina after that.
So if you wanted to do, once you have the knowledge and you wanted to do the movement and the strength bit, and perhaps you wanted to do that using Pilates, and you want access to that wherever you are, where do you go, Claire? How do you pick somebody that can help you with that if you need somebody to guide you?
Yeah, so important. So for example, I've got an online platform, and then even at the back of the book, I give you the tools to know what questions to ask, because there's Pilates teachers all over the world, and it's a fantastic way to help you on that restoration journey for life. And when you come into a Pilates environment, you want to make sure that the teacher is fully qualified for a start. And we joke, we have a studio in Leeds, and my husband does a lot of the management of the studio, and he says nobody ever asks about the qualifications, but I always tell them.
Sure.
And I think it's really, really important when you're working with your body, your vessel. This is it. It's really important to understand that they have a good level of experience and knowledge. So we check that first of all. And then using the education, so you've read the book, maybe you understand what to look for your own body. Make sure you tell the teacher what you're working through. I cannot tell you how many women over the years have said to me, oh yeah, I had a normal birth. And I've said, well, what does normal mean? And they said, oh, well, I had a 3rd degree tear, and then I was sewn up and it was fine after that. That's a major injury. If you tore your bicep open, you would say.
I nearly ripped my arm off. Yeah, right.
Exactly. So it's really, really important that you say it out loud to the teacher, because they will be able to help guide you, because there's certain things you need to be mindful of as you're doing it, because there's a way our body manages pressure. So pressure is like, when you lift up a heavy bag, or a car seat with a baby in it, you can feel that your body's preparing for that weight. It knows how heavy your baby is in that car seat, and it stabilizes to support you. The same is true in a Pilates class. If you lift your legs into the air, your brain has to know how much. But if you've got pelvic organ prolapse, for example, or also another condition that women might have is separated abdominal muscles, which is called diastasis recti. Often it comes together with prolapse. So if you've got both or either of those things, your body might not be quite as well equipped to manage that load, that pressure. So you want to make sure you're only lifting one leg in the air, for example, instead of two to begin with. Because there's lots and lots you can do, but you have to say it out loud that this is what you're dealing with. My recommendation, if possible, is if you've got a studio nearby that perhaps has some apparatus like the reformer or the it's called the Cadillac, these bits of equipment would really enhance and support your recovery. It's a bit trickier on the mat.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Claire, this is really fascinating, and I think probably for people listening who just perhaps had given it up, maybe just thought this is what it is and I'm just going to put up with this because it's part of my female journey through life, or you have your older generation who just tell you that, oh, what do you expect? You've had a baby, and this has given some real food for thought, I'm sure, for listeners. If you wanted people to take away one thing, if that's possible, because I know there's so much to do, but if there was one thing that you wanted people to take away from listening to you talking to us today on family health, what would it be?
There's hope.
Okay.
Doesn't matter what your circumstances are, doesn't matter what your age is, doesn't matter whether you've had children or not had children, there is hope, and it's not just something that we have to accept.
Brilliant, Claire, thank you. Claire, it's been a delight. It's been lovely to chat to you. Learn absolutely loads, and I'm sure all our listeners will have done as well. I hope you enjoyed our Family Health podcast today. Please check out and subscribe to our social channels and the newsletter, where we will update you on latest episodes of the podcast. If you want to watch Claire and I chatting, some people like to watch our podcast, Claire, you can head over to our YouTube channel. But we're also, if you want to continue listening, we're on all your favourite podcast channels as well. Now, what's really important is if there are other topics that you would like us to talk about on family health, please do get in touch. We want to bring as much family health information to you as possible, with some great advice from some top professionals. And so please get in touch. Let us know what you'd like us to cover. You've been listening to Family Health by Mini First Aid. Thank you for listening to Family Health by Mini First Aid. I hope you found our podcast really useful and informative. If you want to know more about Mini First Aid classes, courses, qualification courses or first aid supplies, please do visit minifirstaid.co.uk or look us up on all your favourite social platforms at Mini First Aid. As you care for your family's well-being, remember that Unity Mutual believes in enriching lives beyond pounds and pence and is here to support both their health and financial future. Choose Unity Mutual for your junior ISA and you'll not only invest in their dreams but also receive a free mini first aid class. Thanks to Unity Mutual for making it all possible. Until next time, stay informed and financially secure, knowing that your journey with Unity Mutual is about more than just money. It's about nurturing your future and protecting your loved ones every step of the way.